Do you hear me? James Senior. You sent your hit squad. Y'all had a chance to get me. Honeycomb brazen. All the I told y'all I was in the city. Told you I was in the business. I told you I was in your city, bitch ass.
J. Prince has spoken out, and he had to, because Charleston White stood in the middle of Houston's 5th Ward, looked dead into a camera, and told everybody watching that James Prince is the man responsible for getting him shot. Now the whole culture is divided, and the full story behind what happened that night, why it happened, and what it means for everyone involved is only the beginning of what we're about to uncover. Yo, what's good, fam? We're about to dive deep into some real street drama and industry politics that has been shaking the entire hip-hop community since shots rang out in Houston on July 22nd, 2026. This is the full story, from the beginning, every angle. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into this wild ride, let me keep it 100 with y'all. Charleston White was shot at yesterday. Not in a movie, not in a music video, in the streets of Houston's 5th Ward. And within an hour of walking away from that confrontation uninjured, he went on live camera and did something that most people in this industry would never have the nerve to do. He called out one of the most powerful and most respected names in the history of Southern hip-hop by name, and said that man sent the shooter. We about to separate the facts from the fiction, break down everything that led to that moment, and tell you exactly where the situation stands right now. So check it. Let's start with who these two men are, because you cannot fully understand the weight of what happened in 5th Ward without understanding what J. Prince and Charleston White each represent to this culture. James Prince is not simply a music executive. He is an institution. Born and raised in Houston's 5th Ward, the exact neighborhood where shots were fired on July 22nd. He founded Rap-A-Lot Records in 1986 and built it from nothing into one of the most significant labels in the entire history of hip-hop. Not Southern hip-hop. Hip-hop period. The Ghetto Boys. Scarface, Willie D. UGK. The architects of what Houston rap became were developed on the foundation that J. Prince laid with his own money, his own vision, and his own understanding of what his city deserved to sound like on a global stage. He did all of that at a time when the major label system had zero interest in looking south, when tastemakers on the coast were not paying attention, when there was no roadmap for what he was trying to build. Prince created the roadmap himself. His memoir, The Art of Protecting Your Imprint, reads less like a music industry story and more like a blueprint for navigating power at every level. Business, street, and everything in between. His connection to Drake during the most significant chapters of Drake's career, his standing with major artists across multiple generations, his institutional credibility that extends into every corner of the entertainment world. All of it adds up to a name that carries enormous weight in any room it enters. 5th Ward is not just a backdrop to his story. It is the foundation of it. The neighborhood shaped his entire understanding of loyalty, protection, and what it means to defend what you built. And that is exactly the neighborhood Charleston White chose to walk into alone on July 22nd. What people outside of Texas sometimes do not fully appreciate is what it meant to build Rap-A-Lot in the specific environment where it was built. J. Prince was not operating with major label backing or industry infrastructure behind him when he started. He was operating in 5th Ward, building relationships and making decisions in an environment where the consequences of the wrong move were not measured in bad press or industry gossip. The fact that Rap-A-Lot survived, thrived, and eventually produced one of the most respected catalogs in the history of Southern hip-hop is a testament to a level of discipline and strategic thinking that most people in the culture acknowledge. Whether they say it publicly or not, when Drake publicly aligned himself with J. Prince during some of the highest profile moments of his career, it was not a casual gesture. It was an acknowledgement of exactly what kind of force J. Prince represents. And when Charleston White chose to publicly challenge that force, not once, not twice, but repeatedly over years, he was not just making content, he was making a statement about what he was willing to risk. On July 22nd, the cost of that statement came due in 5th Ward. Now Charleston White is a completely different kind of force. A Fort Worth native, White built his entire platform on confrontation and provocation. He came up through community activism, presenting himself as a reformed street figure with a message. Someone who had lived inside the world he was now speaking against. But his public presence evolved into something far more combustible than that origin story suggested. White discovered early that the more inflammatory the statement, the more people showed up to watch. He challenged rappers. He questioned gang culture. He inserted himself into criminal cases, murder investigations, and gang truces. He made bold claims about figures the hip-hop world considered untouchable. And every furious response, every clapback, every person who shared the clip to prove how wrong he was, all of it translated into reach, into audience, into a brand built specifically around going where others would not. For those who know the culture, White's whole persona was constructed around one central question: how far can you push before the consequences catch up with you? He positioned himself as someone who did not fear those consequences, someone who traveled without security, who walked into volatile situations by choice, who said what other people only thought. The entire brand rested on the premise that he was untouchable, not because he had protection, but because he was simply that bold. On July 22nd, 2026, that premise got tested in the most real way possible. His history of public feuds provides the essential context for understanding why opinions on this story split so hard and so fast. His disputes with NBA YoungBoy Circle ran for years and reached levels of personal invective that made many in the culture genuinely uncomfortable. His comments about Nipsey Hussle and the circumstances surrounding Hussle's death generated some of the most intense backlash of his career, coming not just from fans, but from people with direct personal connections to Hussle's family and legacy. He challenged gang culture publicly while simultaneously positioning himself as someone with authentic street credentials. He made claims about criminal cases and music industry power players that pushed the line between commentary and accusation further than most people in his lane were willing to push it. For some people, all of that made him one of the most courageous voices in a space where honesty is genuinely rare. For many others, it made him a reckless provocateur who was always going to eventually find a situation he could not talk his way out of. On the night of July 22nd, he walked directly into that situation, literally, and came out the other side with a story that forced the entire culture to choose a position. But here's where it gets real. What happened in Fifth Ward did not come out of nowhere. This situation has been building for years, and there were signs along the way that things were moving towards something serious, long before shots were ever fired. White had been publicly attacking J. Prince's name and legacy for a long time. In a widely circulated 2024 interview with Hollywood Unlocked, White stated directly that only people outside of Texas believed J. Prince ran the state. He compared Prince to Suge Knight, arguing that both men had cultivated reputations that were more powerful to outsiders than to the people actually living inside those cities. He was not just questioning Prince's influence. He was calling the entire mythology of performance, saying the most feared and respected name in Houston hip-hop was a construction, that the emperor had no clothes. Those are not throwaway words. In the world J. Prince occupies, that kind of public statement carries very specific weight, and White did not deliver them once and move on. He returned to the topic repeatedly across multiple interviews and live streams over the years that followed. He questioned Rap-A-Lot's business dealings. He made inflammatory statements about people connected to Prince's family and his inner circle. He challenged the culture's unspoken understanding that certain figures are simply not targets for that level of public disrespect. And every time he went there, the engagement spiked. The views went up. The clapbacks rolled in. The algorithms rewarded him for going further than anyone else was willing to go, which meant the incentive structure of his entire career was built around escalation. The more serious the target, the bigger the platform reward. And there was no more serious target in Southern hip-hop than the man who built Fifth Ward into what it became. What made this consistent pattern of attacks on J. Prince different from White's other feuds was the specificity of them. He was not making vague gestures at Prince's reputation. He was naming organizations, questioning decisions, and positioning himself as someone with actual inside knowledge of how J. Prince operated behind the scenes. Whether any of that claimed knowledge was real or manufactured for effect did not matter to the algorithm. What mattered was that he kept going back, and people inside Prince's circle kept paying attention. In 2023, Prince's associate Terrence Williams confirmed as much in an interview, stating that Prince was taking White seriously and was open to sitting down with him because people listened to what White says. That was the only public acknowledgement from Prince's side of the feud, and the fact that it acknowledged White as someone worth taking seriously told you everything about how far these statements had traveled beyond simple internet noise. But yo, this is where the story gets deeper than just clout chasing. See, the comments White made about Takeoff pushed this feud into territory that most people recognize as genuinely dangerous long before a shot was ever fired. Takeoff, born Kirshnik Corey Ball, the youngest member of Migos, was shot and killed in Houston in November of 2022. One of the most closely watched unsolved situations in hip-hop history. White publicly claimed he had information connecting mob ties to circumstances surrounding Takeoff's death. He said he knew about illegal gambling activity tied to the case and that he had documentation to back it up. Let that sink in for a minute. Those are not inflammatory words about a music mogul's business reputation. Those are accusations with federal dimensions about a murder that took place in Houston, J. Prince's city. White knew exactly what he was doing when he made those claims, and the people closest to this situation understood what leveling those accusations in that specific direction was likely to eventually produce. The real kicker, though, is that the feud had already crossed from words into the physical world before July 22nd ever happened. The Crockett incident earlier in 2026 made that impossible to ignore. White was performing at a show in Crockett, Texas, close enough to Houston to carry every relevant association, when a group of men in basketball jerseys began disrupting his set from the crowd. As tensions escalated inside the venue, the promoter, identified as J. Prince's godson, directed people to remove White from the stage. A physical altercation broke out involving White, members of the crowd, and event staff. Police were called to de-escalate. White talked about it publicly afterward in detail, describing the incident as a coordinated attempt by J. Prince's orbit to physically intimidate him into silence. He framed it as proof that what he had been saying about J. Prince had gotten under the right skin. He framed walking away from Crockett still standing as a victory. For everyone watching this feud develop in real time, Crockett looked like a warning. For White, it appeared to look like confirmation that he was right, that J. Prince's people were afraid of what he was saying, and that their response to his words was to try to shut him down physically rather than challenge him in the open. That reading of Crockett is what drove him directly into Fifth Ward. In hindsight, it was a preview of something far more serious than a disrupted show in a small Texas town. And instead of backing down after it happened, White drove directly into the neighborhood where the stakes were the highest. Now this is where we got to address exactly what went down on July 22nd, 2026, because this is the night everything changed. White drove into Houston's Fifth Ward alone. No security, no weapon by his own account. He stopped at an Academy sports store on the way to buy a mask and could not complete the purchase. He kept going anyway. He announced his location publicly the entire time, broadcasting his presence in the most personal territory in J. Prince's world without any effort to conceal where he was or what he was doing. He ended up at a birthday celebration being held for community activist Dr. Candace Matthews. He spent several hours in the area without incident. Then a vehicle pulled up. A group of men got out and approached him. By White's account, those men had one demand: a public apology for everything he had been saying about J. Prince. He refused. The confrontation escalated. Shots were fired. White scrambled for cover, moving between parked vehicles to avoid being hit. He walked away physically uninjured, but the moment had been captured on camera, and that footage was already spreading before White had even fully left the scene. Now here's where it gets real serious, because what Charleston White did next is the moment that made this the biggest story in hip-hop overnight. Less than an hour after walking away from that shooting, White went live. And what he said on that live stream is something nobody in this industry was prepared for. He looked into that camera and said James Prince sent a representative, not hinted at it, not danced around it. Said it plainly and directly. James Prince sent the people who came to that birthday celebration to pressure him into an apology, and when he refused, those people fired a weapon at him. He said he saw the individual who pulled the trigger. He named J. Prince's organization by name. He named mob ties, and then he raised the stakes even further by bringing the Takeoff case back into the conversation, stating that he had information on mob ties' involvement in the circumstances surrounding that murder, and that he was prepared to walk into the FBI field office in Houston the next morning and hand everything over to federal investigators. That's some real energy right there, fam. Think about what that live stream represented. He was shot at, or says he was shot at, and his immediate response was not to lay low, not to quietly call law enforcement. His response was to go on live camera, publicly announced that one of the most powerful men in hip-hop sent someone to shoot him, and threatened to hand federal investigators information connected to an unsolved murder case. Whether you believe every word he said or not, that is a statement about exactly what kind of person Charleston White is, and how far this feud had traveled beyond anything resembling a normal public dispute. The live stream spread across the culture within hours. Academics covered it immediately. Major entertainment outlets picked it up. Hip-hop blogs, YouTube channels, and podcasts were running the story simultaneously. By morning, millions of views. The clip reached people who had never paid attention to this feud before and pulled them straight into the middle of it. And the central question driving every single conversation was the one the whole culture already knew needed to be answered. What does J. Prince have to say? For y'all who might not understand why J. Prince's response, or the absence of one, carries so much weight, let me break it down. In hip-hop culture, particularly at the level J. Prince operates, silence is not weakness. It is a deliberate posture. A man who has spent 4 decades building the kind of reputation J. Prince built does not respond to every accusation, because responding implies the accusation deserves acknowledgement. It is a posture of power. But when the accusation is this public, this specific, and attached to footage circulating across every major platform, the silence does not neutralize the story. It becomes part of the story, and the meaning people read into it depends entirely on what they already believed before that live stream dropped. J. Prince released no public statement, no social media response, no comment through representatives or attorneys, nothing from mob ties, nothing from Rap A Lot. The only prior acknowledgement that anyone in Prince's circle had offered about this feud came in 2023, when his associate Terrence Williams stated in an interview that Prince was taking White seriously and was open to a sit-down, on the reasoning that people listen to what White says. That was it. One acknowledgement across years of escalating conflict, and after July 22nd, the silence resumed, consistent with everything J. Prince had done throughout the entire history of this situation. And to many people watching, more telling than anything he could have said publicly. Now, this ain't just about one man staying quiet. This is about what that silence signals when the accusation involves a shooting, a federal investigation threat, and allegations tied to one of the most high-profile unsolved deaths in the culture's recent history. The hip-hop community split almost immediately. On one side were people who took White's account completely at face value. They pointed to the footage as evidence that something real went down. They argued that what happened in Fifth Ward was a direct consequence of White speaking publicly about things powerful people wanted kept quiet, and that the confrontation was designed to send a message about what happens when you disrespect J. Prince in his own territory. They cited the Crockett incident as proof that this pattern of physical escalation was real and documented, and argued that the July 22nd shooting was simply the next logical step in a campaign to silence a critic who refused to be quiet. For this group, the live stream was the most credible version of events available because it came from the only person who was actually there and willing to speak publicly about what happened. On the other side were people deeply skeptical of the narrative. They noted that no Houston Police Department incident report had been made public. No independent corroboration of the shooting existed beyond White's own video and the clips he posted himself. They argued that White had walked into Fifth Ward specifically looking for the confrontation that would produce the biggest story of his career, and that the live stream that followed was less about justice and more about content. They pointed to his entire history as evidence, a career built on making explosive claims that generated enormous attention, often without the supporting evidence to back them up, and a pattern of inserting himself into dangerous situations that always somehow ended with him walking away physically unharmed, but with millions of new views. They noted that no confirmation from federal authorities had surfaced regarding his stated intention to file an FBI report, and that the takeoff allegations he made on that live stream were serious enough that anyone with genuine evidence would have taken them to investigators quietly rather than announcing them publicly on a social media stream. Real talk, both perspectives carry weight in this story. And the fact that reasonable people land in completely different places on what happened in Fifth Ward tells you everything about why this situation has refused to leave the cultural conversation since the night it unfolded. Charleston White has spent years making himself impossible to ignore. And in doing so, he has also made it genuinely difficult to know where the performance ends and where the real danger begins. That line, wherever it is, got tested on July 22nd in a way it had never been tested before. At the end of the day, what unfolded between Charleston White and J. Prince is not just about a feud that went too far. It is about power, legacy, and what happens when the walls between the digital world and the physical one collapse completely. White built his entire career on testing exactly where those walls stood. He built a platform on the premise that he could say anything about anyone and walk away from it. On the night of July 22nd, in the heart of the neighborhood where J. Prince's entire legacy was born, that premise met its most serious test yet. What we also cannot ignore is what this moment represents for the culture at a broader level. We are living in an era where controversy is currency, where the algorithm rewards whoever is willing to go the furthest, and where the line between content and real consequence has never been more blurred. Charleston White understood that equation better than almost anyone in the hip-hop media space. He built everything he has by operating in that gray area between what you can say and what you should say. But hip-hop did not begin in comment sections. It began in neighborhoods exactly like Fifth Ward, where the rules of engagement have always been different from what plays out on the screen. J. Prince did not build Rap-A-Lot in a digital space. He built it on streets, through relationships, and with the understanding of consequence that predates social media by decades. When those two worlds collide, the one Charleston White lives in and the one J. Prince built, the terms of the conflict changed completely. And everybody who was watching what happened on July 22nd understands that now in a way they may not have understood it before. The real question is, where does this go from here? As of now, no arrests have been publicly confirmed in connection with the shooting. No Houston Police Department incident report has surfaced publicly. White's stated intention to walk into the FBI field office and file a formal report has not been publicly verified or confirmed by federal authorities. The takeoff allegations he made on that live stream remain unsubstantiated. J. Prince has not spoken, and the footage from that night in Houston continues circulating, continues being debated, and continues raising questions that no one outside of Fifth Ward can fully answer with any certainty. Will federal investigators pursue the claims White made about mob ties in the takeoff case? Will J. Prince eventually break his silence and address the accusations directly? Will new witnesses come forward with accounts that either corroborate or contradict what White said on that live stream? Will law enforcement in Houston release any documentation confirming that a shooting took place? Every one of those questions is still open, and every one of them has the potential to take this story somewhere completely different from where it stands today. This story is not over, not even close. And what comes next, whether it is a federal investigation, an official statement, new evidence, or another escalation that nobody sees coming, is going to tell us everything about where the line between hip-hop politics and real-world consequences actually sits in 2026. What are your thoughts on this situation and where you think it goes from here? Do you believe Charleston White's account of what went down in Fifth Ward? Do you think J. Prince's silence speaks louder than any statement could? Is this feud finally done, or is the next move still coming? Drop your take in the comments below. Let us know where you stand, and tap in with the content on screen for more stories like this. 1.